Assalamu alaikum everyone. In this session, we are going to talk about operations management decisions for supply chain management. And this refers to the case study on the COVID-19 led deaths in New York, uh, where the hospitals were all overwhelmed due to shortage of medical equipment. And the name of the case study was Why New Yorkers Are Dying. And out of those issues, these two issues, as you can see on the screen, are related to supply chain management. The first one is over-reliance on government sources for key equipment. And the second one is hospitals turn to the state and federal government for hundreds of ventilators, but many were faulty or inadequate. The question or the problem statement was, how can effective operations management mitigate the supply chain management issues? So here we have come across operations management as a tool to lessen down the risk faced by supply chain management in its issues. Broadly speaking, supply chain issues are one of these as follows. More reliance on supply chains means more risk. They get overwhelmed, the supply chain get choked. Then because of rising demand, there are fewer suppliers. That leads to increase in dependence on them. And then compounded by globalization and logistical complexity. For example, if you are getting medicines to be transported at a required temperature, so it's quite of a challenge to ensure that all along. Then vendor reliability and quality risk is also one such thing where you don't really want to be compromised or be taken a wrong advantage of. And then political and currency risks. These matter all along, and they are also one of the external factors which are not within the control of a shipper or the buyer or the seller. Risk mitigating strategies, meaning lessening down those risks. How do we do that? We turn to research and assess possible risks. We go for innovative planning through a strategic partnership with our vendors, and then reduce potential disruptions, looking for other sources of material. But prepare responses to negative events, contingency planning. Then flexible, secure supply chains, where we talk about agility. Agility is giving us more flexibility and more responsiveness in terms of less time and being able to turn around and respond to the needs of the market, or if there is any competitive product offering just launched, so give a better response with launching a better product or service. And then diversified supplier base. What if our key supplier are not able to, for some reason, supply us with the required material? So we have other options on hand. Matrix-based mitigation strategies. At the end of the day, it's all about ensuring those metrics, the milestones to be achieved. So that's why we relate that to mitigation strategies, so that we press forward in the right direction. So here, performance attributes are those metrics which are supply chain reliability, supply chain responsiveness, supply chain agility, supply chain costs, supply chain asset management. And now, reverse of that is the risk, like supply chain unreliability, supply chain lack of responsiveness, supply chain less agility, supply chain higher cost, supply chain poor asset management. So that's how we go for risk management strategies, by looking for what actions are needed to be taken so that we can lessen down or mitigate those risks and thereby achieve our matrix performance-wise. So what should be done? Coming back to that case study, there are three main focus areas, performance attributes, issues in managing the integrated supply chain, and capitalizing on opportunities in managing the integrated supply chain. So what are those performance attributes? They include supply chain reliability, supply chain responsiveness, supply chain agility, supply chain cost, supply chain asset management. And what are the issues that we face are local optimization, incentives, and large lots. Normally what happens in local optimization, there's too much product-centric approach, not looking outwardly market-wise, understanding the changing demand pattern, behavior, requirement of the customer, and so on and so forth. So we tend to just push things towards them. Incentives here, we want to look for only those products that give us good profit margin, or maybe they are discount promotions or trade offs and so forth, trade discounts. So we go for only that matter. And large lots, where we wait for all orders and we ship a combined order together to save on transportation costs and other costs as well. As opposed to that, the federal government or the state government should focus on the opportunities in managing the integrated supply chain. They should look for pull data, data that is actually gathered from the checkout aisles, where inventories are electronically recorded and the invoices are generated as customers pay money. And single stage control of replenishment. This replenishment is where we uh, appoint a point person to address all the concerns of our client and understand the client needs in a better way, so that those needs can be fulfilled through customized replenishment by the vendor. Then vendor managed inventory, where the vendor itself serve as the inventory manager for their clients. Collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment in supply chain lingo. This is also called CPFR model, whereby the vendor become the strategic partner with their key clients, and they jointly then do the planning, forecasting, and replenishment. Blanket order is meeting the needs of the client by signing an agreement with them that the client will buy from us a fixed amount of units, but that fixed amount of units would be bought in chunks and pieces based on the needs of the clients as they arise. So that is the blanket order or rate running order, as it is called. And then postponement strategy is where we halt the production up to a certain point, and then we customize the products to the specifications received in the order from different customers. And then drop shipping is where the seller, not really the seller, but the manufacturer uh, sends or delivers the products to their customer directly without relying on the seller. So that is where, and these are the ones where we can see how the federal government and the state government can turn and adapt to the needs of those hospitals that they are serving amidst corona pandemic, so that they can provide them with necessary machine equipment. Now here on the slide, we talk about the demand planning process, which consists of the following steps. This is really important when it comes to demand management, as it's based on forecasting. And forecasting the needs of hospital is where we have to look at the trends. So how do we go about it? We need to collect data, which has to be input like a forecast data from former planning runs, historic customer orders, shipments, to get a look and feel of the data. And the computation of further data based on statistical forecasts, looking at the current trends, maybe the curve itself, the judgmental forecasting by human planners or those experts, healthcare experts, staff, pandemic experts who are keeping an eye out on the activity of pandemic and the curve, and based on their expert opinion, you make an informed decision. And then consensus forecasting, consolidating different views of the planners and dealing with exceptions. There, we also have the a lookout for anomalies, and then we have the expert opinion available on that as well to find out any abnormal behaviors, and then we can be prepared for any contingency occurring thereby. Then planning of dependent demand, the demand for components of the finished goods, in this case, maybe the ventilators, they are the last resort, and before that, there are other equipment needed. Some patients that come in have a complaint about their kidney problems. Some have heartbeat issues, and some require oxygen. So these are all dependent equipments which are needed because of that virus that has affected them. And then release of the forecast to further planning and execution processes, where you take into confidence your vendors to come up with a joint strategy with combined effort, with accurate data sharing, so that there is neither more or less, just exactly what is there in the field required, and you, based on that, you take actions, necessary measures as well. Now here you can see lead time analysis of supply chain decisions. Some are the decisions which are, as you see, order driven, like here, and some are which are forecast driven. Order driven decisions are the ones which we have to make then and there when their order is received, and they require very less lead time. Whereas forecast driven are the decisions for which we have to do planning in advance, and they can go all the way up to 8 months before you uh, make a decision or you serve your customer for that matter. So that gives a detail of different decisions that you have to take and how much you have to take them in advance based on forecast driven strategy. Whereas under order driven strategy, the decisions have to be taken well, not more than 3 days in advance, because they are short time based and they are based on customer orders as they receive. Now here's another angle. How can effective operations management mitigate the supply chain management issues? Now earlier we have talked about supply chain management in the context of a hospital and then the metrics and so on and so forth. Now here we are going to look at it from a different angle, where we talk about risk management strategies. How do we manage risk? Earlier we have talked about risk pertaining to different aspects, and now here uh, the risk mitigation, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk acceptance types are discussed. Risk management strategies are developed and communicated. Commonly used strategies are risk mitigation, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk acceptance. Risk mitigation is a plan to reduce the probability of occurrence or minimize the impact of the risk. You work towards that, go for preventive measures to avoid that risk and keep that risk from happening. Risk avoidance occurs when the supply chain risks are too high and you cannot control them, so you just avoid them. And you look for other alternative ways and means. Risk transfer occurs when part of all the risk can be transferred to another process. It cannot be borne by you all by yourself, so you just share it with your supply chain partners, where it presents a better prospect of management or mitigation through less costly action. There are certain activities which are less mission critical. So those could be outsourced. So here you have to grapple with with the decision whether you want to do this particular item or this particular activity by yourself, or you are better off sharing it, handing it over to somebody else who could actually do that for you. So that is where you are actually transferring the risk and becoming more laser focused on the more eminent things which are important to you and strategically of concern to you. Risk acceptance occurs when a risk has low probability of occurrence and low impact, and for which a contingency plan is easily available for deployment if the risk occurs, controllable risk. So you go for that. And how do you tackle with that? You come up with the contingency plan, and that is the alternative way of handling that risk. Risk management strategies may differ by supply chain. So now that's the ideal situation where you can control risk. So this is where you want to go and grab it and lay it out the way you want by resorting to contingency strategies, plans, and so on and so forth. Now here is being taken from the real actual world, basically how supply chain risk is registered. For that you have to create a register, and then in that register you mention different risks. Here if you see here, we have identified score process. Under score we have source, and the risk identification is plastic strip supplier shut down by labor strike, and the chances are 10%, and that strike would cause us $5,000. When the value at risk, because of that, the investment that we may probably lose, or the money or the investment that may probably get stuck uh, in terms of items being unsold, would be $500. So we give it a category 5 with G denoting a green color. Likewise, here is a blue color and here's the orange color. So category 2 is the most extreme one. Here, increased delivery cost due to high price of fuel. It has a 95% probability and the impact is enormous, $10,000. And our investment is going to be lost, worth of $9,550. So total risk magnitude, which is the value at risk that we might lose, comes to about 21,350. So that's how you go for the risk categories. And here you can assign them the probability along this continuum. One end is unlikely and the other one is very high, and the mid one is moderate with high and low on each side. All right, so here, this is again a snapshot of score model, as you can see over here. So it really helps us understand how our organization is impacted by the score model. And with this diagram, we can identify the risk which we have talked about in previous slides by pointing them here to see how and where they are occurring. Now, here we talk about supply chain risk monitoring, that how organization actually monitors supply chain risk. Once areas of risk have been identified, the organization needs to monitor their internal and external environment, risk monitoring, uh, where it helps to predict when risk events are becoming more likely, helps identify new risks, and it continuously assesses the effectiveness of a supply chain risk management, where it is continuously making our supply chain more efficient. That's why we are all continuously going for check and balance monitoring, because supply chain are operating in a very fluid environment and they need consistent monitoring, where we are constantly looking out for any change that is happening in our supplier world, uh, because anything that happens with our competitors has a direct or indirect impact on our supply chains as well. or anything that happens in our external environment, be it political, local, social, environmental, could really impact our supply chains. So, if you look at this, the effectiveness of the supply chain training management program can be assessed by monitoring three general aspects: the risk exposure present in the supply chain, that is use value at risk metric, the portion of risk actively mitigated, that is value at risk with active mitigations divided by total value at risk, and the ability to respond and adapt to risk events, where comes your agility factor, that is use time to recover, that is TTR metric. All right, so here supply chain risk assessment is shown in this diagram. On the y-axis is measured impact, and along x-axis is probability, and those uh, issues or the events that are likely to occur are then plotted here to give us an idea about the likelihood of and the potential impact in dollar terms on our supply chain and our business. With that, thank you very much.